Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in and watching my video blog, Public Comment. Got a lot of interesting things I want to chat with you about today. These things would include, of course, the fact that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is now on the record as saying that the Attorney General of the United States of America under the Trump administration, Barr, in fact, has lied under oath and committed a crime. So we'll be doing a little examination into that. Also, I'll be taking a peek at the Mueller Report and just offering one observation that I made that I find interesting and disconcerting. And also, we'll be talking about Joe Biden, the former vice president, and why I believe he's in fact not the ideal candidate for president, why I do not think he's the best primary contender among the Democrats. So then with that, we'll get started talking about what is obviously the breaking news today. I'm just doing a quick sound check here. So let's just see how that's working. If you will forgive me for just 3 seconds, I just want to make sure. Okay, it works. I just wanted to do a quick sound check there. Okay, so you may or may not know that, in fact, Nancy Pelosi did speak today.
How sad it is for us to
she
see
did
the top law
flat out say that Attorney General Barr, in fact, has committed a crime by lying under oath.
When you see
and this is quite a thing indeed.
What's his motivation? His motivation, his
and there's
loyalty.
A lot
not to his oath
to talk
of
about here.
office,
So what is this all about,
and
though?
it is to Trump, but
this goes back to
and the Republicans
the Mueller report, of course, and how he has been responding to it. If you want to look at a few articles from the New York Times and the Post, I believe that reading these things does allow it to sink in a little bit better than just hearing it on the TV or the radio or through a podcast. That's my opinion. So the great article here, I don't know. Barr's professed ignorance prompts Democrats to seek his resignation after Mueller letter. You can see here is a picture. I get these things printed really small because I like to save my paper. So here is the lowdown here. I do imagine if you're watching, you probably have an inkling. But essentially, Attorney General William Barr acted as if, first of all, he had no idea what was going on in Robert Mueller's mind as Mueller is sending the report to him, and played stupid. And then we get a letter from Mueller explicitly criticizing the Attorney General. This is an obtainable letter. I definitely urge you to check it out. Here's my copy of it. The part that you may have heard commentators hone in on, which is really important, would be here. The summary letter the department sent to Congress, the summary letter that the Department of Justice, under the leadership of Attorney William Barr, sent and released to the public late in the afternoon of March 24, did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of this office's work and conclusions. We communicated that concern to the department on the morning of March 25. There is now public confusion about critical aspects of the results of our investigation. This threatens to undermine a central purpose for which the department appointed a special counsel to assure full public confidence in the outcome of the investigations. But the Attorney General wanted to say that this conversation didn't happen, that in fact Mueller's concerns were about the media and their reports of the report. Their reports on this thing here, the Mueller Report, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a second. And so this raises the question, what's going to happen to the Attorney General? And what does it mean? Did he, in fact, lie under oath and perjure himself? These are things that we need to investigate. There's a lot going on, in fact, with respect to this controversy, because what we see is that we have Barr not only accused of lying, and not only are members of Congress seeking either his resignation or that he be impeached, but also the Department of Justice has failed to produce an unredacted version of this thing here, the Mueller Report. And I'm going to talk about one reason why we certainly would want to look forward to the unredacted version, or want Congress to see it. Because there are some disconcerting bits of information in Mueller's report. So there's a lot of conversation about essentially what should happen here. And one question raised is this: should Attorney General William Barr, should he be found in contempt of Congress? And what does contempt of Congress mean? These are things we're going to talk about. But I want to share with you an interesting comment that we got from Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler, Democrat from New York. I think that he put it really quite well when he talked about this. He said, the Attorney General must make a choice. Every one of us must make the same choice. That choice is now an obligation of our office. The choice is simple. We can stand up to the president in defense of the country and Constitution we love, or we can let the moment pass us by. So said the Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler, Democrat of New York. There's a face to the name if you were wanting to get a look at that. I think that's really, that really has to leave us with a moment of reflection and pause here. Because indeed, we find ourselves wondering about the rule of law at this point. If in fact, we could say, as Nancy Pelosi did, that, and other members of Congress have said, that Attorney General Bill Barr lied under oath. And that's a crime, that's perjury. What's going to be done about it? Is anything going to be done about it? What does it mean if nothing is done about it? And what does this mean also about the accountability of the president and whether or not he breaks laws? And what does this mean about how we're all going to perceive the rule of law? And what happens when we see only a selective group of people accountable to the law, whereas other people won't? And what kind of divisiveness could this create? And what kind of dissent in morale in this country could we observe and experience? And how will this change further the way the world views the United States of America? So, yeah, that's really something to think about. Right, so bottom line, as Mueller said, Barr, his characterization of Mueller's report before the report was sent, quote, did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance, to use his words, of his investigation. On the one hand, and then being questioned about it. I just wanted to find the article that I read that struck me most about this. Right? So, for example, when Congressman Van Hollen asked Barr if Mueller supported his conclusion, and Barr said, "I don't know whether Bob Mueller supported my conclusion." We have evidence that says to the contrary, that Mueller had sort of clear thoughts on the matter. So there are questions then about how the Attorney General is behaving. We do have one law professor, Jennifer Levinson, professor at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. This is from the Washington Post article published yesterday. She told the Washington Post that he will likely could shield himself from a perjury charge, and that he's tiptoeing, dancing, and threading the needle all at once around perjury because of his attempts to be ambiguous. So the question's going to be, to what degree can Barr be held accountable? And what does this mean for us? So one of the options here is something called, I apologize here, contempt of Congress. And that raises the question, what is contempt of Congress? And there's a great article by CNN that I consulted for this, that I'm showing you where you can go to take a peek at that and also read it. But essentially, what is contempt of Congress? I mean, the call to find Attorney General Barr in contempt of Congress arguably is going to be pretty meaningless. Now, there are different things that can be done, but okay, so what does it actually mean? I mean, you can, of course, read this for yourself, but essentially it means that Congress is saying that you're obstructing their investigation. And so what happens if, in fact, Barr is held in contempt of Congress? Well, a few things could happen. Theoretically, Barr could be detained. He could even be imprisoned, prosecuted. He could be compelled via subpoena, via the courts. But what precedent exists that this kind of thing would happen? Of course, we live in unprecedented times, or virtually unprecedented times. This would be if, in fact, Attorney General Barr did happen to be found in contempt of Congress. This would only be the second time in the entire history of this nation of ours that a member of the president's cabinet will have found him or herself in this place. And the last time this happened, of course, was when Attorney General Eric Holder was found in contempt of Congress over issues with the Fast and Furious investigation earlier this previous decade. But that really didn't amount to anything. So this really just raises the question of what significance it really would have if we were to find the Attorney General in contempt of Congress. I think that the more aggressive and productive thing to do would be to move beyond contempt of Congress and examine impeachment proceedings as well as consider possible prosecution. These are two things, in fact, that need to happen. Just this notion of a lack of justice infecting this federal government is extremely upsetting and frustrating and unacceptable, and we need to do something about it. Of course, we can call our members of Congress and we could have a conversation about, what degree of impact is that going to have. All I could tell you is that it's probably a better thing to do to at least do it and do your civic duty and say that you won't tolerate this. And, it is a fact that members of Congress do keep track of what their constituents say, because nothing scares them more than the prospect of not being reelected, at least in theory. They actually have software that keeps track of these things, what people say. So if their phones are flooded with complaints about the Attorney General lying under oath about what in fact did take place between him and the special investigator Robert Mueller and his investigation into Russian interference in our elections and their associations with the Trump campaign, I mean, it's better to do it than not do it, in my opinion. So this is something I think that we really need to think pretty deeply about. And that was the significance of that quote by Nadler that we were talking about. The Attorney General must make a choice. Every one of us must make the same choice. That choice is now an obligation of our office. The choice is simple. We can stand up to the president in defense of the country and the Constitution we love, or we can let the moment pass us by. What would that mean? To let law enforcement become less and less significant in this country. And that's just utterly unacceptable. So that would be, I want to move on now and talk a little bit about this Mueller report. Just, there's a lot to take in here, so I don't want to, it would take me a very long time to cover all 400 plus pages here, so we're going to keep this to one little segment today that I want to talk to you about. One little thing to think about, and I would argue, though, that this is pretty darn significant. As far as my copy goes, this would be on page 115 of the Mueller Report. And it talks about the meeting at the Trump Tower meeting, the now infamous Trump Tower meeting, and what really happened there. You may remember that the context here is that Donald Trump Jr. was contacted and told that there was dirt on Hillary Clinton to be had that the Russian government could supply him with. And you probably remember now that very famous thing, that infamous thing that Donald Trump Jr. said, that if it's what you say it is, I love it. Right, so one of the most fundamental questions of the infamous and curious Trump Tower meeting that we lack so much information about still is, what did the president know about this at the time that the meeting was happening and before the meeting happened? What kind of knowledge did the president have that the Russians were going to offer his campaign dirt on Hillary Clinton and her campaign? And that's this piece of the report that I want to show you. You take a look at it. I mean, this is quite a document. So this would be from the Mueller report here. Michael Cohen recalled being in Donald J. Trump's office on June 6th or 7th when Trump Jr. told his father that a meeting to obtain adverse information about Clinton was going forward. So Cohen says that indeed Trump knew there was some kind of meeting with dirt on Clinton that was going to transpire before it happened. Okay. However, Cohen did not recall Trump Jr. stating that the meeting was connected to Russia. Okay, there are two things to take away just from this little tidbit here. Number one, Cohen said he did not recall whether Trump Jr. stated that the meeting was connected to Russia. He did not deny. He did not say one way or the other. He did not say yes. In fact, Trump Jr. told his father that they were going to have a meeting with the Russians in which dirt would be provided about Hillary Clinton to tarnish her and impede on her campaign. He did not say yes or no. And this, in my opinion, as we've watched a variety of testimonies, as we consider Trump's own written answers to questions to the special counsel's investigation, there's a lot of I don't remember. You can remember Jeff Sessions when he was questioned by Congress. He said a lot, I don't remember. And saying you don't remember something is very different than a confident assertion or a confident denial. So I would leave that for you to contemplate. Okay, the report moves on. From the tenor of the conversation, Cohen believed that Trump Jr. had previously discussed the meeting with his father, although Cohen was not involved in any such conversation. Now, the question would be raised, why did Cohen believe that Trump had previously discussed the meeting with his father? And I wonder why we didn't get a little bit more probing into that. But nonetheless, he did volunteer that belief. It could be that Cohen's lying. It could be that Cohen is telling the truth. And we move forward here. In an interview with the Senate Judiciary Committee, however, Trump Jr. stated that he did not inform his father about the emails or the upcoming meeting. Now, what I want you to take note of here is that in the case of Trump Jr., before the Senate Judiciary Committee, a flat denial. He did not say, I don't remember if I emailed my father. I don't remember if I talked to my father, the president, about an upcoming meeting with the Russians providing dirt on Hillary Clinton. He didn't say, I don't remember. He flat denied it. Now, this is interesting because Mueller and his group of writers here proceed. Similarly, neither Manafort nor Kushner recalled anyone informing candidate Trump of the meeting, including Trump Jr. That's key because Trump Jr. is offering a flat denial. In no way, shape, or form, he's suggesting to us, did I convey to my father, the president, the now president of the United States, that we were going to meet with Russia for this dirt on Hillary? But Manafort and Kushner don't deny it. They just say they don't remember. Now, we can speculate, we can try to infer something, and I'm not going to say one way or the other that this provides any kind of solid evidence or anything. that in fact Trump perhaps knew indeed that the meeting was with Russia. However, the lack of a confident denial by these two individuals both strikes me as something that we need to talk more about, something that needs to be further explored and investigated. And also, I think suggests, in fact, that it is possible, pardon me, forgive me, my pen's dropped, that it is possible that there is reason, circumstantially, to indeed suspect that, in fact, Trump knew. Because it would appear that two particular individuals wanted to protect themselves from perjuring themselves about it, as opposed to offering a flat denial. Why couldn't they deny it? That's the question. Why couldn't Kushner or Manafort offer a flat denial? That, to me, smells pretty intensely of trouble. And the fact that, indeed, it would seem that Trump knew, and it would seem that if Trump knew, there's serious questions, I think, beyond impeachment, but, bordering on treason, really. In conspiring with an enemy government to illegally coordinate election interference. We have intense reason here. And so just because the Mueller report didn't reach the degree of evidence that confirmed unequivocally of collusion doesn't mean that there was no conspiracy between Russia and the Trump administration. What it means is that the evidence was lacking. And as some commentators have said on the news, which tends to be the opinion I'm leaning towards, is this. It is a fact, right, in the second volume of the Mueller report, that it is all about the obstruction of justice case, which Mueller did not say, he did not say that Trump was innocent of obstruction of justice. He cannot clear him of that. When you obstruct justice, as other folks have said on TV, when you obstruct justice, you literally try to prevent an investigation from acquiring evidence, such as through lying. We've had members of the Trump administration caught lying. Paul Manafort, his former campaign chairman, being one of them. So the bottom line then is this. If there's lying, if there's obstruction of justice, then in fact there may not be necessary evidence yet obtained. But that doesn't mean the crime didn't happen. And of course you are innocent till proven guilty. And I respect that element of our legal system and American philosophy of justice. However, when there is circumstantial evidence accompanied with obstruction of justice, there is, in my opinion, serious grounds to suspect concern here, in this case, of conspiracy. I believe that's just a logical deduction. There's no partisan thinking on my part with this. Okay. Now we move on and we talk about former Vice President Joe Biden. Now, it's my opinion that Biden is not the best candidate among the now 21 or so candidates running for the Democratic primary for president. And there are a few reasons. I'm just going to touch on a few. There was a very interesting article that came out of the New York Times today. I believe I failed to do my due diligence and snag a picture of this, but here's the article. It's Biden faces conflict of interest questions that are being promoted by Trump and allies. It was published last night by the New York Times. You could at least take a look here if you're curious. So this is a really interesting, somewhat complicated story, but I'm going to try to make this as simple as I can for you. First of all, I want to be clear that though there is the appearance of a conflict of interest with respect to former Vice President Biden, were he to be the President of the United States, I'm not saying he has done anything illegal. I'm not saying his son, who is going to be the subject of this discussion, necessarily did anything illegal. I don't even know that there was necessarily something that was utterly unethical. I would say, though, I'm a little concerned with why Biden's son is doing business with shady Ukrainians. It really doesn't make me feel comfortable, to be honest with you, especially when that's what we're trying to clean up shady business as we grapple with the Trump administration. But here's the lowdown, okay? So we're talking here about Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. Now, Hunter Biden served on the board of the Burisma Holdings natural gas company, which was owned by Ukrainian oligarch Mykola Zlochevsky. And this fellow, Mykola Zlochevsky, during the time that Biden's son, Hunter, was on the board for this company, this fellow, this Ukrainian oligarch, as they call him, was facing prosecution by the Ukrainian government for money laundering, tax evasion, and abuse of power. And it's alleged here that Biden's son was involved with legal dealings of the Burisma Holdings natural gas company. Of course, Hunter Biden denies this and says that in no way, shape, or form did he have any kind of involvement with legal stuff going on with this company. And that may be true. But I do think there needs to be a conversation about the appearance of a conflict of interest. First of all. Second of all, I'm just a little bit weary about judgment here. In the first place, if you go back to 2014, when this was, realized by the Washington Post back in 2014, I just think it was actually inappropriate on the part of the Obama administration to even have Biden involved in anything relating to Ukraine when his son had rather deeply direct ties to a alleged Ukrainian criminal, who, by the way, fled the country after the sort of rogue former Ukrainian president Viktor Yanukovych was ousted and fled. So there's just a sense of Biden's son sort of being around someone, having to do with someone he shouldn't have had anything to do with. And it does lead you to wonder why. And it makes me uncomfortable, again, that Biden would have had anything to do with Ukraine in this case. But he did, because Biden, as vice president, was part of trying to lobby Ukraine for various policy positions that the Obama administration wanted Ukraine to take. And I want to quote here Adam Taylor, who wrote about this back in 2014 for the Washington Post. He put it this way, and I like the way he put this, and this is what I want you to think about. The appointment of the vice president's son to Ukrainian oil board looks nepotistic at best, nefarious at worst. No matter how qualified Biden is, it ties into that idea that U.S. foreign policy is self-interested, and that's a narrative Vladimir Putin has pushed during Ukraine's crisis, with references to Iraq and Libya. It clashes with the U.S. narrative that this is all about international law and human rights. The part of this quote that I really like goes back to this. The appointment of the vice president's son to Ukrainian board looks nepotistic at best, nefarious at worst. I mean, it just has a bad look. And you could argue and say, isn't that shallow, superficial, etc., etc. But if you even think about, for example, the emoluments clause of the Constitution, the emoluments clause isn't in the Constitution just because it isn't there just because the goal is to prevent the president from being bribed by foreign officials, right? But it's also there to curb the appearance of bribery, the appearance of a conflict of interest, because the appearance of conflict of interest hurts the legitimacy of government dealings. It gives people grounds for discomfort and suspicion. Not to mention, it sort of creates an air for inevitable biases. I'm sorry, but can you really be doing the business of foreign policy so directly with another country when your son is implicated in a criminal case that has a lot of pressure on it? I just think that it would be unreasonable to assume a father wouldn't have that on his mind in the dealings. I mean, I think it's inappropriate. I was never in love with Obama's foreign policy in particular. I thought that was one of his weaknesses, but I just think this is also really poor judgment on Biden's part. Moreover, I think this is a serious liability with respect to running against Trump in terms of campaigning and how it could be perceived as we probe into this, as the right-wing media probes into this. Again, there may be no actual illegal or inappropriate occurrences that transpired as a result of this, but it looks bad politically. It looks bad as a public relations issue, and I'm not sure that this gives us a reason to feel especially confident with respect to Biden's sense of judgment, of ethical judgment, in my opinion. It's a serious blemish. And that's why I'm actually glad that the New York Times posted an article about this, because better to do it and get this out of the way so that we can have a more solid candidate. So, I mean, bottom line, I just think that I think Biden is extremely vulnerable. There's one more thing I want to talk to you about with respect to Biden. And that is another place where he's vulnerable. There's a good article by Politico that I think you should check out. Democrats itching to take down Biden over a free trade past. That's something I was taking a look at this morning. It was one of the articles read on my exercise bike, and I didn't get a chance to print it out. But this article examines the fact that when you're looking at how the politics is going on, say, in some of the Midwestern states where, manufacturing went abroad and people lost jobs to, overseas transplanting, so to speak. People were really frustrated, and Trump's message resonated with these voters. So the argument that people are making for Biden is that he can appeal to this, lower working class white factory guy who lost his job. That Biden is going to appeal to these people. But the argument is that Biden, in fact, perhaps actually doesn't hit on the frustrations of his demographic quite as much as other candidates. And as the primary debates go on and as more policy talk comes on here, it's possible that Biden is just not going to push hard enough on this issue. And in fact, you could have people like Bernie Sanders appeal to these people, perhaps with much greater resonance. There's an interesting, that's the wrong photo. I apologize about that. But there's an interesting video you can check out on Bernie Sanders' Twitter account, where he talks about how he voted against NAFTA. He talks about some interesting policies. He makes the point, I didn't see a citation for the statistic. However, he talks about essentially over the last 40 years, manufacturing workers, factory workers, haven't made much more than 40 cents over the last 4 decades. And so Biden makes this really visceral video about it, which he tweeted, and he provides 2 very interesting policy proposals. Number one, he talks about passing an executive order to end permission for companies and corporations that leave the United States to get federal contracts. He also says no more tax breaks for factories that go overseas. I have not yet heard Biden offer an explicit anything better. I actually would agree with Senator Sanders on these 2 policies. There's no reason for people who leave the country to get federal contracts, and I don't say that for any kind of nationalistic reason. More specifically, I would say if you leave the country as a corporation and you employ people at exploitive rates, in that case, I believe you should not get federal contracts. So I don't have as unilateral a position here as Bernie Sanders does, but I think he's onto something. As with ending tax breaks for any factories that go overseas, this is a policy proposal that I could get on board with. Again, one of my most specific concerns is with companies and corporations, not only that get tax breaks or federal contracts, but when they do so, and they're also exploiting, for example, Chinese workers, as Apple has done. So I just think that I think candidates like Bernie Sanders, who, by the way, he's not my guy per se. I would vote for him over Trump, but I'm not. He's not the candidate at this time who I'm most attracted to. But I certainly think that he's got something more visceral and tangible and significant at this time than Biden, who seems a little bit more placid and overly lukewarm. So I want to leave you with one other article I read that came from the New Republic in this new May edition that really struck me, and it again has to do with this whole Biden thing. The name of this article by Alex Perrine is called this is the title, Democrats Have Created an Electability Monster. And you could just take a peek at what the article looks like. You can get it for free. I think you can get a few articles for free from the New Republic. The essence of the article is this. Perrine is saying this whole notion of Biden being the most electable candidate, first of all, might not be true. Second of all, why are we prioritizing a presumptuous notion of electability as opposed to who the best candidate is? And so this is, I'm going to cite just a little bit from this article for you to think about. Perrine writes the following. Electability is a crock of shit. It is defined like political moderation only in terms of opposition to things people want, but are told they can't have, ranging from anti-war politics to left-wing economic populism to even the cultural liberalism that is seemingly the cornerstone of the modern Democratic Party. While the impulse to vote according to how you think a candidate would appeal to people who don't share your priorities might make sense in theory, practice has revealed time and time again that no one involved in electoral politics has a clue who or what Americans will actually vote for. That was supposed to be the main lesson of Trump's election. I mean, I think that puts it perfectly. I share this opinion too, that there is a conversation to be had about needing to defeat Trump. It's sort of a crisis situation. As we can see, we've got the Attorney General lying to the American people, lying to Congress, and at present getting away with it, and Republicans looking the other way and in fact attacking the Democrats instead of any accountability whatsoever. So we've got an actual erosion. We've got an actual destruction, a chopping, a cutting away at the rule of law right now. So there is a conversation to be had about ensuring, obviously, that whoever it is that we elect, that the Democrats elect against Donald Trump, can win. But this notion of someone being electable, what does that really mean? What's the criteria, and how valid is that criteria? What is that criteria founded on? That is a serious question. And so this article really examines that and makes some interesting points. And I think the best takeaway was the whole lesson of the last election was that we kept saying there was no way Trump was going to win. If you can remember back in 2016, at this time in the primaries then, everyone was saying Jeb Bush was going to be the candidate. Just like everyone now is saying Biden is going to be the candidate. I mean, I just wouldn't be surprised if Sanders is able to appeal to voters in a similar way, in a way similar to Trump, resonating with a desire for something more populist and less elitist, something that people really relate to, and something hard-hitting. And again, with the whole Hillary Clinton thing, and this is talked about too, right? Clinton comes across as disingenuous at the time. She comes across as more of the same at a time when people want something so deeply new. And I think Sanders, for a lot of people, would reflect that much more so than Biden would. Of course, to be clear, I'm not for, at this time, Biden or Sanders. Both of these folks at this time would be on the lower levels of my list of preferred Democratic candidates. So I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to watch my public comment video blog today. I certainly would love to encourage you to check out my blog, publiccomment.blog. should totally check it out. Give the website a look and enjoy some other political commentary, other aspects of the conversation going on. And obviously, I would want your point of view as well. I'd love for you to tell me what you think. I know that we're not always going to agree. We're not always going to agree, and that's okay. The whole point of the public comment video blog and the public comment blog more broadly is this notion of public comment. You see, back when I used to go to town council meetings, almost narcissistically, keyword almost narcissistically, this was one of my favorite times, because it's the times where the constituents get to talk directly to their lawmakers, synthesize their concerns, express them, and try to make an impact. And so that's what my goal with the public comment blog is to, in fact, cultivate a good public commentary. But it's not just about what I have to say, it's about stimulating conversation. So I absolutely want you to join in here. And so I want to thank you so much. Again, I encourage you to check out publiccomment.blog. I encourage you to check me out on Facebook, leave any comments, reach out, etc. And I just want to say again, thank you. Have a great day, and I look forward to chatting with you and doing all we can to make this country a better place. Thank you so much.